Sarah with Always in Stitches here in Noblesville, Indiana, and today I'm going to introduce you to the 900 CPX. This is the lowest end of the Janome cover stitches. We also have the 2000 and the 1000, which have a couple differences to the 900. The 900 has 2 needles instead of 3, so if you were to upgrade, there's a center needle here that would make it so you could either use all 3 needles, or you could move your needles to the right or to the left, either one, by using 2 narrower needles. But this is a nice, I like the wide stance because it does look like a purchased item when you're finished. The other thing is they have a couple tension places that you can adjust your tension a little more. This knob is very important to getting your tension right. This is supposed to be set somewhere between 10 and 11 millimeters, and it's the distance between the base of your machine and the bottom of this cap is what they're talking about. So we start out to thread with the looper in the bottom. So you just open that. Sorry, Peter. You open that with your thumb, it just springs open. And we come back up here and get the thread. Now you've got these 2 holes. I just stick mine through one, but if you're having tension issues, you might want to try that. And then you bring it down through the disc. And my foot is up because then the discs are all open. And then I'm going to pop it through these 2. There are 2 little prongs. I put that through there. And then I'm going to turn my knob here until they're all 3 lined up. Oops. And slide those through. So I'm going to bring my thread through. Now there's a little hook down here, and I just bring it behind. Then there's a hole up here. And did you see me do that?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so there's a knob here. You pull that knob towards you, and then thread that little hole there. Drop it over the top and push it back in, and it's going to come up on its own. Okay, so then I'm going to raise my needles, and I'm going to start with the outside needle. This is good on the serger too, to know which side to start first in your little order. You look at this hook here because I want to do the one on the inside first so I don't have to cross over. Pull it through that hole and down through the discs. There's the tension discs are inside there. And then I'm bringing it up over here behind that. Now there's 2 sides on this little hook, so I come in on that side and behind there. And now this is the tricky part. This is actually the hardest part for me, is getting that needle threaded, and it usually just pops through when I'm at home. Okay, I pull that through. I think the cover stitch is the easiest machine to thread out of all the machines. And then, okay, so now I have my thing down. So did you hear that pop in there?
Yeah, what was that from?
That's the discs are together. So I need to make sure. So since I put that down to thread my needle, then I could possibly run into a tension disc issue there, because when my needle's down, the discs are together. You have to make sure that threads through there.
So do you recommend having the presser foot up when you're putting the thread in the discs?
I do.
Okay.
And if you run into a problem later, that's something you should check. Okay, so I use my fingernail there to pull that through. Okay, then the next thing, I'm going to change this foot out. This comes with your machine, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I can't see where I'm sewing. So I bought this. This is an extra. It's called a clear foot for the cover stitch machine. Mine's a little bit worn. And you slide it in there. And then I get my little prong over and push a button back here, and it just pops on. And then I take these threads. Now, sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't, but when you're starting, you want to Just pull that through there. And it won't get tangled up, and it's just one thing that's not bugging you. And this machine has a free arm, so when I'm sewing generally, I usually leave mine off, but I'll show you a couple things with it. So it just slides in here, if it's going to do it for me. And I got a call from a customer one day because she was having her fabric bunch up back there, and it turned out hers was up like that, just a little. So if you ever find that problem, you know to take a peek there. So I have already set this, and it's fairly good. I'm going to show you just regular cover stitching. We've got our machine sewn, and I do test on scrap. I keep a little pile of my scraps right next to my sewing machine. I do test it to see if everything in the threads. Now that is bunching because of my threads that were back there are holding it. And if you bunches, it is a little finicky. If your fabric is bunching, your machine is not sewing. So this came forward several stitches. And one of the other things you can do when you first start out is to hand crank several stitches. I do like 4, and that will bring your looper back in. And you can see the tunneling is because I'm doing one layer. So that's something that comes into play on the hemming, is if you are off the edge, you're going to get tunneling like that. So I'm going to show you how to finish this first. When you take it off the cover stitcher, you make that loop and clip it, and then give it a little tug, and that locks the stitch for general use, but you still need to finish it off. We're going to tie a knot. And then I bend my threads over instead of trying to get all my threads the same length and through that hole. And then slide it through there and clip it. And that will keep it from coming undone. I have some spots that skipped. And that is because I haven't got that knob at the top here quite right yet. And I think it's going to need more, so I loosened it a little. Now we're going to do a hem and see what happens. When you hem with the cover stitch, you hem underneath. Did I bring clips? I don't think I did. Okay, so at home I clip with the Wonder Clips, and the Wonder Clips have measurements on them, and so I leave like a 1/4 inch above the cover stitch, and then I know where my edge is. But you can also see it under there, and you can feel it. And if you're not comfortable with that, you can serge this edge, and it'll make it stick up just a little bit, and it'll help you see. I'm going to go off the edge of my fabric just a little bit so you can see the tunneling I'm talking about. Now I'm going to go back. Okay, so you can stop a cover stitch anywhere you want. That's another nice thing about it, is a serger you have to go through some heroics to get off the edge. But you can do this in the middle of your garment if you wanted pin tucks. Let me show you clear. Can you see how, I don't know if you'll be able to see the tunneling, but this is where I went off the edge, and there's a little bit of a bump to it, whereas this is nice and smooth. There, I did. No skipping. So just that little bit was enough. So now at the end, we do it again. This is how we end. I'm doing the knot, bending it over, and I'm going to show you what I do on a real seam. Is I come inside the fabric. So it's not, I mean, the other way, and I do check that because I do go to the front sometimes. Okay, so the needle's not showing through, and you only need just a little bit. And then I yank it, and I try and get the knot to pop through. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. If I'm in a seam where I'm going to go sew that, then I would leave my strings hanging off and just catch those in the serger knife. And now I'll show you how to do a sleeve. I'm going to pop this free arm off. I actually leave my free arm off most of the time unless I need a really flat surface. I actually don't know where it is. If we're honest. All right, we're going to slide this on here. And I have about 1 inch. If you get too narrow a seam, the longer seams like your waistband will roll. So I do try to do at least 1 inch. And you can move it along with your thumb. This isn't as smooth. This tends to make a scallopy edge, but you can lock it with your fingers like that. And then now I want to try and hit this. So when I come to this point, I clip my thread because we're going to overlap, and that will help. This side is locked when it goes on, but I just like to have it overlap a little bit. So I'm looking at this thread. I'm going to try and hit. It's pretty close. You try and hit your threads together. I've lost my needle. There it is. All right. And this is, if you put your needle here before you lift, it's easier. And then swing it around back and clip it. I don't know if you all know that there's, on almost every machine, there's a little razor in there. And then you take this and give it that little, and you do the same thing as you did with the other one. You lock that off. So I don't lock my serger threads, but I do lock my cover stitch, because if you've ever bought a garment and had your hem come out, that's why, is they didn't lock their their cover stitch. So it is actually an important step. So there's a couple important things with the cover stitcher. One is locking this stitch, and the other is that knob on top of your machine. So in my bloopers reel, we had a couple things that came about that I'm going to point out to you. Is at one point I was sewing with no thread, and that was because, one, the thread came out of the tension disc. So I start, whenever I have a problem, I start out at the top of the machine and I check my tension discs to see if my thread, and it was clear up here. And then I open this up and I follow my thread path all the way. And this one is still threaded, so it's fine. So those are some things to check if you run into problems. If you're skipping stitches, it is 90% of the time going to be this knob. And if your stitch is not stretchy, then it's going to be your differential knob. And you'll want to check your manual and see what to set it at. It usually should be at 1.0 for a stretchy hem. Thank you very much.